All right, here we go. So the Alaska Permanent Fund was the only one that, by its name, permanent. So I'm guessing this is an oil revenue fund, right? They put the oil revenue kind of like Norway does, except in Norway, their fund funds the government, which essentially means they have to tax the people less. And so instead of any kind of UBI or direct payment to citizens, the citizens face the benefit of that through lower taxes or more government services, kind of just how they set it up. But it looks like Alaska has one, and they directly pay out to citizens. So let's have a look. Yes, it's the most studied program of its kind anywhere, precisely because it's the one real-world case that's genuinely universal, unconditional, and permanent. Researchers, a lot of the best work comes out of the University of Alaska's Institute of Social and Economic Research, treat it as the gold standard natural experiment for what a real UBI might do, since every other study is some compromised version. Here's what they found domain by domain. Okay, this is what we want. First, the basic grounding. Since 1982, every person who has been an Alaskan resident for the prior year gets a permanent fund dividend check each fall, and in recent years the payment is about $2,000 per person, though the amount swings year to year with fund earning and politics. It's been as low as a few $100s, and with a one-off energy relief top-up in 2022, north of $3,000. So that's like what, $250 a month-ish? Let's figure that out. So if you're north of 3,000, I can divide that by 12. $250, yeah, I was right on. So you get $250 a month, essentially. It's given in a lump sum. Like, I actually prefer it if you provided it monthly to people, because then, like, that's something you can plan into your budget. But I guess lump sums are also nice for people. You give them a lump sum, and all of a sudden, a different part of their brain works, and they deal with larger sums of money. To, like, maybe now they have enough for a car, or now they can look at investing this money because they have it as a lump sum rather than a monthly payment, which tends to just go straight to standard of living. I think a UBI probably should be done monthly, but we'll see what this one tells us. Everyone gets the identical amount regardless of income, which is what makes it a true dividend rather than a means-tested transfer. Absolutely. Employment. This is the headline result and the one most cited in universal basic income debates. The definitive study is Jones and Marcenu. Let's get that right.
Marinescu.
Jones and Marinescu. NBER 2018, published in AEJ Economic Policy 2022. Using a synthetic control method, they show the dividend had no effect on employment and increase. I mean, you're dealing with a tiny dividend here too, right? $250 a month isn't going to change a lot of employment. The mechanism, they showed the dividend had no effect on employment and increased part-time work by 1.8 percentage point, 17%. The mechanism is the interesting part, and it's exactly the general equilibrium point I flagged earlier. Calibration of micro and macro effects suggests the results are consistent with cash stimulating the local economy. Makes sense? Like this is what in my opinion, um, the greatest effect of a UBI is that it would create jobs. It would create opportunities. It would create demand for services. It would, um, like maybe not the lump sum, but at least if you give it to people monthly, they will include that into their budget. They will spend that money, and that will show up as GDP in your country. A general equilibrium effect, with non-tradable sectors showing a more positive employment response than tradable sectors. In plain terms, any individual inclination to work a bit less gets offset because everyone's extra spending creates extra local demand and therefore jobs. That's why a universal payment behaves so differently from the targeted pilots. When only a few people get money, there's no demand effect to offset the labor supply pullback. They interpret this as evidence that general equilibrium effects of widespread and permanent transfers tend to offset the individual labor supply effect, at least on the extensive margin. Two other papers reach the same broad conclusion. The findings across papers show the PFD has not had a negative influence on the labor market. In fact, there's evidence of a small positive demand response. The other thing is you will likely see an increase in the value of labor. So not only does it look like there's a small positive demand response in labor, there's also probably a positive response in wages for labor. Because if you give people money, there is going to be an effect of people staying home, right? Kids that stay in school longer because they have an income. Married women stay home as a caregiver. You will see decreases in labor, which I don't think is bad, honestly. But the demand then actually causes an increase in labor, and the value of labor, and so now it's more profitable to have a job. I mean, like these sound like great effects. Giving people $250 a month sounds like it has good effects on the economy. Health. Several distinct findings here, all modest but positive. On infant health, an additional 1,000 in income increase birth weight by 17.7 grams and decrease the likelihood of low birth weight by 14%. So this is the poverty, right? You give people money, there's less poverty. Who'd have thought? With the effects highest for less educated mothers. The benefit extends past birth. For 3-year-olds, there is a strong evidence that the PDF reduces obesity? Like, you have more money so you can eat healthier? Well, that's not what I didn't even consider. I assumed there'd be an increase in obesity. But they found evidence, Watson et al. 2020 found evidence of the exact opposite. Okay. Broader reviews link the PFD and similar programs to better birth weights, higher breastfeeding rates, and reduced childhood obesity. 2022 fertility study found it increases short-term fertility without increasing abortion. So maybe the reduced childhood obesity is more You have people that move from full-time to part-time. Um, you have other people, specifically married women, that move from working to caregiving. All of a sudden, uh, you now have a parent in the house that watches what the child eats and can make meals for the kid. And so that reduces obesity. I'm guessing that's where that comes from. Crime and the temptation goods question. This is the most politically loaded question. The perennial claim that. What the heck is that? Okay, let me get this word. We must understand.
Perennial.
Okay, so I know the word. What does it mean? Something that lasts for a very long time, reoccurs regularly, or is present throughout the year. Okay, so like, I remember hearing about in terms of flowers. Present throughout the year. In botany context, a perennial is a plant that lives for more than 2 years. So a plant that comes back, whereas annuals are 1 years and then they're gone. Okay. Perennial. The perennial claim, so the one that keeps coming back, that giving people cash leads to drinking, drugs, and chaos. The Alaskan data is the clearest test of it. And the answer is essentially a small short-term blip that nets out to almost nothing. Watson, Gitabi, and Ramir, Review of Economics and Statistics, Universal Cash and Crime, found that substance abuse incidents increased 14% the day after payment and settled to about 10% increase over the following 4 weeks. While property crime decreased, the property crime drop being the intuitive people with cash don't need to steal effect. But crucially, on an annual basis, the changes in criminal activity are small and the estimated costs are a small portion of the total payment, leading to authors. I mean, even if it does lead to drinking and drugs, like that's demand. You need people to provide that. That's still, and it's saying it doesn't really even do that. People with cash don't need to steal effect. But crucially, on an annual basis, the changes in criminal activity are small, and the estimated costs are a small portion of the total payment, leading the authors to conclude that crime-related concerns of a universal cash transfer program may be unwarranted. A more recent large study reinforced this. Analyzing 11 years of statewide data, researchers found no evidence to suggest direct cash payments increase the risks of death or of injury or death, with Alaskan former chief medical officer noting no evidence of increased trauma or mortality temporarily associated with the cash transfer across the entire state's population over 11 years. So this all sounds good. Like, why hasn't this been tried on a larger scale? Maybe it's later. How many more do we have? Just 3. Let's go through this, and then we'll talk more about it. Poverty and genuinely counterintuitive inequality result. On poverty, the dividend worked as you'd expect, especially for the most vulnerable. The PFD has resulted in substantial poverty reductions for rural Alaskan natives, particularly pronounced for the elderly. But here's the wrinkle that surprises people, and it's worth understanding the mechanisms. Perhaps the most unexpected result in this literature is that while the distribution reduces poverty, additional evidence suggests the PFD increases income inequality in both the short and long run. What? Isn't that the whole thing it's designed to fix? That sounds paradoxical, but the logic is that a flat equal payment is a larger proportional boost to poor households, yet a larger absolute additional layered onto an economy where, through the demand and consumption channels, higher income households can end up capturing more of the downstream economic activity. So are you telling me that when you provide money to poor people, they spend that money and the wealthy people actually get richer? Because they spend money on goods and services, obviously, and that creates income for the rich. I don't necessarily see that as bad, because the people that get the income do get the goods and services that they pay for. And giving them more money means they can purchase things and get a higher standard of living. Even if the rich get richer, then doesn't that mean that they should be on board? Because you get to raise the standard of living of everyone, and in the end, the like business owners do well because everyone has more money. Like, in the economy, what you want is to spread money out and then have businesses collect the money by providing services to the people. Like that's the idea, right? And the more service, the more money they have, the more services they can buy, the more the businesses collect, and then you tax the businesses, and then provide the money again. And what you create is a cycle of wealth transfer, which, I mean, wealth moving from hand to hand is GDP. Like, that fundamentally, that is the providing value. That is what GDP is measuring in the end of the day. And so businesses actually do well in a situation of UBI. It makes sense. You give people money. Most people don't put that in a rainy day account. They just go and spend it. Buy a car, upgrade, do a renovation on a house. You know? I find very, very few people are actually like savers. And so if you give them money, they just spend it, and it just helps develop the economy. I don't know, on a large scale, I think this could be incredibly beneficial. Like, not just for the people getting the money, but for businesses. Okay, let's see. It's a useful caution against assumption. Everyone gets the same check automatically means more equal. I mean, I don't really care about an equal society. I want everyone to have a good standard of living. You can have really rich people. Like, I really don't care about that. As long as, like, you don't have people living on the streets, or the people living on the streets, they have money to have a house, and they're just drugs. Like that's your choice. But I still think, if you're a reasonable person, like raise the standard of living so that everyone can afford a decent life, right? Like that's the goal of a UBI. Assuming you don't mess your life up, you can have a good life. Okay, let's finish, and I might come back to this one because that is an interesting find. So, where does it say it? Increases income inequality in both the short and long run. Let me copy that because I wanna come back to that. Because, like, maybe this means you give everyone $250, all of a sudden rent is $250 more. Like, that doesn't help anyone, right? But if you give everyone $250 and now there's a new bakery because everyone's got a little more money, even if that bakery does well, like that's not a bad thing. You're creating economic growth there. Okay, I'll ask about that one in a second. Where'd I go? Consumption. How people actually spend it. Early researchers found little change, but better data revised that. Kang found households increased consumption of non-durables by 22 to 24 cents per PDF dollar in the 3 months post-distribution, with spending concentrated on consumables, food, fuel, and services. I mean, when you get your PDF, that's a good time for a vacation right there. You got your money. Now you get your vacation. Right? The fact that it's an annual lump sum rather than a monthly stream, that's the thing, right? When it's a monthly stream, which I personally think is a better thing to do, it turns into daily expenses. Like, but maybe that lump sum is what stops rent from eating it, or like food costs from eating it, right? I don't know. Matters for behavior through mental accounting. People treat a once a year windfall differently than they treat the same money spread across 12 months payments, which is one reason you can't perfectly read across from Alaska to a monthly UBI proposal. Exactly. Okay. Bottom line. Taken together, the Alaska research is the strongest real-world evidence that a universal permanent cash dividend doesn't produce the disaster skeptics predict. No meaningful drop in employment, no surge in crime or substance-related harm that survives annualization, and modest health and poverty benefits, especially for the worst off. As one of the ISER economists put it, the PFD is the world's only continuous, universal, and unconditional income program, making it a rare opportunity to learn about the behavioral effects of a UBI. The honest caveats. The dividend is relatively small. A couple thousand a year isn't a livable income on its own, so it tests a universal supplement more than a UBI you could live on. Well, I mean, a universal supplement is kind of a true UBI. Like in my brain, UBI is going to start out small, and then as the effects of it are seen to be positive, is something you increase, and then it becomes a political discussion, and then you choosing between two different parties. What's their stance on the UBI? And so creating it and bringing it into frame into the Overton window is kind of what you need to do first. But I imagine it would be a long time before UBI could provide you a livable income just on its own. If ever. Like, I expect it would be a substitute. Like, you have your standard income, and then the UBI is an additional income on it. It's paid annually rather than monthly, and Alaska's remote, resource-driven economy isn't a clean stand-in for anywhere else, so it answers some of the questions the temporary pilots can't. The general equilibrium and labor supply ones, while leaving the what if the payments were large enough to live on question still open. I mean, we won't get the answer to that for a long time.